when I began taking painting more seriously and painting with more intention, I sometimes would be so committed to an idea that its execution would be strained. I would stress over details that at the time I didn't necessarily have the tools in order to make what I wanted to convey believable. When I began studying the tips and hacks at the school that I attend, the tips and hacks that I learned became easier to apply. I found that although painting has been my focus and figurative works pronounce themselves, taking a step back to release myself from figures granted me a new type of freedom.
Calm down, Jamal. Don't pull out the 9.
Because many of my concepts require movement that I feel like is not actionable for me on canvas, I began using painting as a way to freely release. So without commitment to perhaps an idea, a thought, a figure, an object, and videos I used in order to freely release critical concepts that I may have based on observation, conversations, readings, documentaries, films, movies, what have you. The non-figurative works allowed for my process to be the medium and the composition to enunciate that.
I don't generally care about theories. They kind of get in the way of looking at the picture. But I think the result of working from a theory can be fantastic. But it also could be done maybe without the theory, but you don't need to know the theory in order to appreciate the painting.
The approach that I have with my video work, I began applying to my paintings. This reset made the process so much more engaging because I was remaining present. I had no assumption on its concluding outcome, nor did I pressure a time frame. So creating these abstracted works, and abstract works meaning like there's no figure involved, the process is the medium and the medium is the process.
I really like to look at it. And I can look at it a long time because there's a lot of different parts that succeed as a whole. I think of this as an intellectual painting, like a léger.
It's the construction of the picture that he's interested in and that you're interested in, right?
I don't know, but I think so. Sounds good.
Over the course of 3 weeks, I created a total of 8 works. I used found materials like old mail, tape, hot glue gun, paint obviously, string, overall items that were just laying around. I used a paintbrush, a roller, sometimes I would be scraping, oil pastels, markers, really just anything that I had. I just decided, well, let me just use this on the canvas. Turning my canvas somewhat into a playground for small sculpture, mini sculpture works, or just being able to turn the canvas into something a bit more malleable. I definitely considered Mark Bradford and his practice of soaking paper and then dyeing it.
I'm an artist that paints with paper. I use, whether it's billboard paper, culled from the streets, it has a use value. Usually the materials that I have some use value in the world. And I begin to take these materials and form what I consider paintings, sculptural paintings.
Side note, so I write down everything before I'm gonna say it because I'm testing out which is the best way to execute a YouTube video, whether I can ramble and then edit it afterwards or write out exactly what I'm gonna say to keep myself from rambling. I don't really know which one is the best one. It seems that I can read each line and then pause it and then keep going. So if you have any recommendations on how to record pretty much like a seamless YouTube video for editing's sake, let me know in the comments because this is my first time and I'm open for all critique. Doing this made the paper more malleable, somewhat like clay, so I was able to move the paper around because it was wet, and I used the canvases on the floor instead of upright on an easel. I mixed wood glue, water, and paper, and I would tear the paper up, and then stir it in a bowl. And then I would apply it to the canvas, and over the course of 1 or 2 days, it would harden, like really rock hard, so that I was able to apply paint or oil pastels or whatever I wanted to over it. I thought of how I don't necessarily enjoy flat canvas, so I did all that I could in order to manipulate a complex surface. Sometimes flat surfaces on a canvas for me are super boring because it doesn't engage, and since I am not necessarily a fan of using oil paints, I like to create my dimension by making a textured and more complex surface. Whereas I find that oil painters who are more refined in their studies really engage their audience and viewers of their work by capturing light and movement and are really great at it. But for me, the complex surface is where it's at for me. I was even slightly offended by my enjoyment because of a mention from Kerry James Marshall, and he made an observation and he briefly expressed that many of the abstract works, most people have the same reaction to it. And I was just like, dang, that's a little bit true. But I just decided to keep at it because I was thoroughly enjoying myself, and I wasn't committed to whether or not viewers would have a similar feeling to other works, but really just my personal enjoyment and my personal growth and the idea to explore a different type of way of creating. Then I began thinking about how many artists who experience Blackness switch modes to abstracted works, because abstracted works often do not have a type of authorship. I mean, anyone could really create a work that was non-figurative in its composition, meaning that there's something on there that's not necessarily of or related to an object that you may perhaps be familiar with. Anybody can do it. And so it allowed for many artists to enter into spaces because, you don't know who the author is. It could be anybody. As I kept at it, I decided to add text using a hot glue gun. I committed to using titles that insinuated race, which would mean authorship. So for me, I didn't necessarily want to neglect that I experience Blackness or that I am also a woman. So I decided to add a little text here and there, and also use titles, the titles of my work, in order to further enunciate who I am as the author.
I decided to take out a very offensive word out of my name so everybody could say it. Boys and girls, Asian people, t-shirts could say my name. I decided to take the young out of young nigga. No more young, y'all. Now I'm just nigga. Oh my God.
I feel that with these 8 pieces, I wanted others to experience my commitment to joy and an identity that not only has been imposed upon me, but one that is also embraced through a social culture. These works are a study of non-figuration, of composition and its intersection with literary designation. So for me, bridging the gap between abstracted works without authorship because of how they look, with texts that imply an authorship, whether that be through race, social alignment, economic group, gender, whatever that may look like for me at any given moment of how I feel, and bridging those two together. I personally admire these works that I created because they were exploratory for me. Art and science go hand in hand, so I'm very proud of myself for taking the time to experiment and commit. It allowed for me to learn which processes can be repeated in my other works. So this for me allowed for me to learn what actually works for me, what I enjoy doing, how long I can do it for, how many pieces that I can create, and how that can translate into future practices and pieces that I create. This was fun. This was abstract. The same way that I do my video works. With my video works, I collect a whole bunch of media from different sites like Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and all these different places that exist now, presently. And I archive them in my phone to pronunciate the culture later, which would be a culture that I am actively immersed in, which would be the digital age, me being a millennial, a woman, Black, and just existing in the now. And with my video work, I just put things together, modern collage, and remixing media to see what type of conversations I can have with other people and to perhaps ignite a dialogue. And so I wanted to activate that in my paintings and see what would happen. And it was like very fun for me to do. And I created a total of 8 pieces.